So with insurance industry in general, we don't have a good reputation. We don't have a fantastic reputation. It's mainly about taking money and not paying claims, right? We also have a pretty bad reputation on staffing as well. So I wanted to create a business where I look after the staff. It's a place where they want to come to work and they have a sense of development. And then I also want to educate my clients. Like I want them to have my knowledge, and then they take that knowledge elsewhere and they find that, hey, not everyone is offering this. And if they can do it on their own, they can go off and do it on their own as well.
All right, guys, thank you for jumping on today. We've got an awesome guest. Today we've got Thong from DuoInsurance. He's going to be with us sharing some awesome tips and also a little bit around himself and some of those things that you should know as a landlord, as a property investor. It's super critical to an investing journey, but also maybe some of the other things that he does in terms of insurance in general. And I think you're going to get a lot of value out of it today.
So what I'm most excited for today's episode is our property blueprint brain buster. It's something that I've never heard before, and I know our viewers are going to get a lot of value on. So guys, stay tuned. So Thong, we were just sitting there back before in our, whether you want to call it the green room or the back room,
bunker.
Just preparing for today's episode. And you were touching a little bit on, your story growing up and how you got into the insurance space. So let's tell the guys that are watching a little bit about that story and your journey to get into insurance and to bring us here today.
Yeah, I mean, it probably started when I was really young. So even before I could remember, I was born in Ukraine, and my dad actually was murdered when I was 2. So that was a massive turning point in my life and also my family's life. We were growing and we were going to be really prosperous, but that situation brought us back a few years, a decade even. So in 97, I eventually came to Australia. My mum owned a small shop in Sunshine, Victoria, and I was looking after the shop. I was the man in front, right? I was a receptionist, and a person that didn't look quite right mentally came into the store. I was yelling out to my mum from the back, tell her to come to the front. She didn't come in time. He tried to rob the register. I jumped on his back and I took him down. Yeah. And I was scared for my own life at that point.
Imagine,
yeah. And then we had another situation, like I was telling you before. We had another shop in Brunswick, also in Victoria. And during the night, robbers actually came in and took all our stock.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, at that point, we could have been really, really hurt. We didn't have insurance at the time, by the way. Yeah.
So hence you attacking them.
yeah. I was insurance.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sometimes people's insurance policy is their baseball bat under their bed these days, right?
I know. I don't recommend it.
Okay, we don't recommend it.
Don't recommend it. Yeah.
It's a backup.
It is a backup. But actually, in that situation though, the insurance that my mum took out was the relationship she's built all those years past.
Yes.
So we lost everything, but she had a lot of friends who was willing to give her their stock to sell so that she could get back onto her feet.
That's amazing. The power of network.
Yeah, and I think,
community.
That's great to hear. You're exactly right. Having those networks allowed your mother to actually get that help. That's what she did. It's a really great story to hear. And before we go any further, we have introduced a new segment, and then Tuan's going to give us a little bit of a spiel and teaser for you guys. But this segment is our property blueprint brain buster. So Tuan, give the guys a little bit of a teaser of what we're going to address at the end of the episode today.
Guys, you're going to want to stay tuned for this one because we had a friend of mine many years ago, and this is going to be a great scenario for Thong, our guest speaker today, and our guest host today. Essentially, they were assuming that the right time to take out an insurance policy was when they settle or just the day before it. And that's the same thing that I've been doing for many years, but we're going to go into that and actually ask Thong, why is that not such a great idea? So stay tuned to the end. Okay, so Thong, we've grasped the story of your upbringing and, sort of you being the family man, given your circumstances. What led you to then go light bulb moment?
So with insurance industry in general, we don't have a good reputation. We don't have a fantastic reputation. It's mainly about taking money and not paying claims, right? We also have a pretty bad reputation on staffing as well. So I wanted to create a business where I look after the staff. It's a place where they want to come to work and they have a sense of development. And then I also want to educate my clients. Like I want them to have my knowledge. And then they take that knowledge elsewhere and they find that, you know, hey, not everyone is offering this. And if they can do it on their own, they can go off and do it on their own as well.
It's a great point you mentioned there about, you know, we're talking about insurance and how difficult it is and the bad name that's come from that. That's probably the reason why now, you know, you've got a bit of experience now, Dan, like establishing your own insurance organization or firm, is that there's so much red tape, isn't it?
100%. Yeah, and that's the thing, like, you know, coming now, seeing the other side of what gets to happen, there is a lot of red tape, and knowing that, you know, there's layers and layers and layers just to be able to get, you know, quotes and policies out for the client. And really, you know, the main thing we're trying to do is making sure that we provide the right policy for the client. I think that's what's very important. And I think, Thong, you know, you could speak on that a bit as well too, that potentially people, you know, are not understanding the fine print of their policies, or they're taking out policies based on price, which could potentially get them in trouble. How could someone get in trouble by taking a policy out based on price just alone?
Yeah, well, you guys been with me for a couple of months now, so you guys kind of
on the journey.
Yeah, on the journey, you kind of see a lot of the background on it. So when we take out a policy, we don't just take out insurance. It's not like, hey, I have insurance. We sign a contract and the PDS is like 100 pages, right? Yep. So in that 100 pages could be pretty much anything. Like,
and the PDS, just for the people who are not sure what a PDS is?
Yep. It's a product disclosure statement. Okay. So it states what you're covered for and what you're not covered for, essentially, right? Yep. Yeah. So you essentially sign that document. So if you go to another insurer, that's a new document that you haven't read before that you need to go through in order to purchase a policy. So for us as insurance brokers, we've read these policies before. We have a lot of clients who purchase these things. That's where we add the value.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like I should really read my product disclosure stuff, because I, for one, and I'm going to represent all the viewers out there, we do not read PDSs, and it's silly, right? Because insurance is one of those things you don't need until you do. Yeah. And that's why we sort of like, oh, yep, I've got to get it done. Yeah. But we don't even know sometimes the cover that's involved and included.
That's right. And I'm not saying that insurance brokers read from A to Z on the policy document, but we understand how to read the policy and find the covers that you're looking for. Exactly. You may assume that you're covered for flood, for example, but not all policies cover for flood.
Yeah, and that's a big one, actually, because I know we've had a few cases ourselves with flood, and
that's right. Yeah.
You know, I've been working and talking with the clients that the work that we're having to do behind the scenes to make sure that we find the right policy for the guys, and then flood is a big one, and any sort of, you know, natural sort of thing that could happen is definitely one that you have to sort of read between the lines, I believe is the right way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, flood is definitely a big one. And that's where I actually recommend talking to experts before you purchase your first property. Because if you buy in a flood zone, it's really, really difficult to buy insurance. And also, even if you're able to buy the insurance, it's really, really expensive. So your return on investment is much lower than you actually think at the start. Yeah.
That's actually a really good point to mention there. I think a lot of people go through the journey of buying an investment property or a particular property, and some of the things they don't actually think about is particularly insuring that particular property or any other things that would have to come after it. So it may be a good sort of value up front, but potentially when they go to insure it and they find out it's a flood zone and their insurance is, you know, thousands of dollars, then it can turn into a very bad investment very, very quickly.
For sure. And I guess that's the power of, you know, some of the people we've had on to the show, like buyers agencies. These are some of the very fundamental things they look at.
Yes.
Is the property in a flood zone?
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Do you want that headache of being untenanted for 6 months while you repair a flooded property? Like, these are the things that you know, it's important to source correct property before we even get to this stage of insurance, which is
and I think one of the things I was thinking about on the drive here is actually you and I, we work with a lot of professionals, so we get a lot of these advice just because we're in the industry, right? And I'm really glad you guys put on this podcast, because you're actually using our sources to educate your clients, because that's really good.
There's only so much me and Dan can share with the audience, that's for sure. And having experts on like yourself, Dan, Thong, is so critical. But one thing I noticed from my experience with you having an insurance broker myself is that now that you've taken on a lot of insurance, even my car policies, is there's some things that I didn't realize in my motor vehicle policies, that part of the PDS that you explained to me. And who's guilty, on our viewers who are guilty of going online and putting a quote and maximizing your excess bar and then hitting submit, and then you don't even know what's actually included. And then some of the things that Thong mentioned to me is like, did you know that for example, your landlord cover only covers for like a month of rent when there's a tenant gone or the tenant disappears? Well, a month when someone disappears sometimes might not be enough. What if your place is damaged and you need 3 months of rent cover because your place needs to not only got no tenant, but it also needs to be renovated for 2 months. And so some of these things is critical, right?
Yeah, I mean, the industry for that section is changing quite rapidly. And that was one of the first conversation that you and I were talking about. And that's why we wanted to start DuoInsurance, right? So because we had that whole large period of time where everyone was staying at home and everything like that during the pandemic, the insurers reduce your rent default cover, and that's why we only had the 1 month cover. It used to be a lot better, and that's why we partnered up with one of our insurers, which gives you 20 weeks, which 20 weeks is, I believe it's more than enough.
5 months, right? Thereabouts. That's a substantial amount of time to get things. And just in my experience alone, just my friends and the people that I've spoken to, they've witnessed some extenuating circumstances of uninsured periods, right? Which is something, was it Steve we were talking about not long ago? And is that a good example you can share with us while we're on that topic?
Yeah, so this is one where they actually insured directly with the insurer. So they did go through like a kind of a broker channel, but it's essentially the insurer as well. So what happened was that they had an agreement over the phone that they're going to pay X amount of weeks, and then if the work continues, they would pay additional loss of rent. However, what he didn't realize was he actually signed a cash settlement. So a cash settlement means that the insurer can wash their hands of this claim totally, right?
Okay.
And then all they have to do is pay you the agreed amount on that contract. So they don't have to pay any more than that. So currently now, fortunately, the insurer, I believe, have logs their phone calls. So what we're trying to do at the moment is we're trying to go back to that phone call to get that recording in order to prove his innocence, essentially.
Okay. So it pays to sort of have somebody on your side.
That's right, yeah.
That's acting on your behalf, to know these things.
Like a broker.
Like a broker when they come into place.
I don't want to say anything yet because we haven't
Settled.
we haven't went through the process.
But just having
yet.
that representation is, I guess, a little bit of alleviating on some of that pain. To have that support.
And I mean, the conversation came up because we were having lunch and he was just, sharing his frustration that he couldn't get this done. And just talking to him, I realized that there is something more that we could have done or could do. So, and we're going through that process now.
So for some of the first time investors potentially watchers, I know we're talking a little bit about landlord insurance.
Yeah.
I know we have some first time investors watching and they may be going through their journey now of purchasing their property and looking to have it as an investment. Maybe they're not really familiar with landlord insurance. Maybe they're not familiar with why they would even need to have something like landlord insurance. So maybe you could, explain a little bit about why they would even want to or need to have something like landlord insurance. I know we've already spoken about a few points, but maybe there's other topics and points that would be, good for them to know why they need it.
So an insurance broker, right? So the misconception is that all we do is buy insurance for you.
Yeah.
We're actually advisors. And as an advisor, I would actually like to be part of your buying process.
Okay.
So for landlord insurance, right, the costing is a big issue because what you're buying is an investment. So what you want is return on your investment.
Yep.
So if your insurance costs is such a large portion of that investment, you might want to buy something else, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. And additionally, we don't just advise on landlords, we advise on businesses as well. Okay. So there was a client of mine who's a familiar client of mine. He usually goes out and buys things and tells me later, right?
Okay.
Yeah. We had a situation where he called me up. He's like, I just bought a business, right? He's in the contract phase. So he's not obligated to do anything just yet. I asked him, I was like, hey, have you reviewed the contract? And he's like, yeah, I reviewed the contract. It's $50,000 to buy, and I'm going to earn $100,000 during the year. I was like, wow, that's amazing. That's like 2 times your investment, right?
In the first year.
Of course, in the first year, right? Yep. But he didn't he didn't get professional advice. So I just told him to go to a property lawyer first or a commercial lawyer first. So even before I do the insurance, which the insurance was a decent premium, so I would have made a lot of money. But I didn't want to buy that for him before he took that advice. It turns out that $100,000 was a contract to one large company. So the business that he's buying is based on one contract to a large manufacturing company.
One income stream.
Income stream. And what guarantees does he have that that contract will continue when the business is sold? None. So those are the things that we want to advise you on, because we want you as a long-term client. You know, we take money for you the first year and we lose you for the next 10 years. That's not great.
Yeah. Essentially, you know, it's good to be seen as a partner in the journey instead of just a one-off sort of transaction.
Yeah.
You know, I heard a lot about, you know, during the claims process, and, you know, people, let's just call it, may or may not have been particularly truthful, you know, with their application when being asked the question, have you claimed before, or anything in relation to their history. So could you touch on a little bit about how, if someone wasn't quote unquote as truthful as they should have been during the application process, how could that come back, and what are insurance companies doing these days to actually check?
Talking from experience, Dan?
No. Stories that we've heard along the way.
It's just me, is it? It's just me.
No names being mentioned yet.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So I'm not going to lie. A lot of people, they get away with it.
I'm sure we've got a lot of people nodding their heads at home right now.
Yeah, that's right.
Edge of their seat.
So a lot of people do get away with it. So we can't police everyone. But lately, especially right now when car prices are going up, investigation is very common. So if you make a claim, you declared that you haven't had any claims in the past, or you're zeroed the route points, expect that the insurer may send an investigator to find that out, and before they pay out the claim. So your claim can be delayed if you don't have the right documentation as well. And if you have lied, they can reduce your claim or deny it altogether.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, really importantly is to tell the truth, because there's no point reducing your premium just for a saving that is going to go towards nothing when you actually need the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And even if you're in that situation, there's things that we can do to help. So if you're in that situation, reach out to an insurance broker. Yeah.
It's better to be truthful up front, right, than having when it comes around in the end and you know, you realize, oh, I should have said the right thing. But I think insurance is one of those things where everyone just takes it out at the beginning and we'll just get the insurance until they actually need it. Then they're like, oh, maybe we should have read the policy, or maybe we should have understood a little bit, or maybe we should have actually told the truth a little bit when it actually
I actually know people that have gone through an insurance claim for a motor vehicle that was damaged or written off, and that claim assessment took I think the period of 12 months, and the car was worth maybe $100,000.
Yeah.
And, you know, for a 12-month period, that's a long time. And it means that they're quite thorough. So I think it's always worthwhile to just, you know, be sure about what you're putting down and what you're saying to these insurance companies.
So that, again, the information, if they haven't provided upfront, it can take a long time. It can take 12 months. But if we provided the correct information and, you know, we're responsive, that claim could have been done in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, the approval could have done in 2 or 3 weeks, and the repairs, I don't know how long that would take normally. Yeah.
So, Thong, we have talked about in previous episodes with property buyers and how they structure, how they buy their property. I know we've had a few scenarios as of recent times where potentially people are buying in their super fund, or they're buying in companies, you know, making sure that they have the right name on the policy. So how is this going to affect their policy, and speak a little bit about having the right name on the policy?
Yeah. So having the right name speeds up the claim process as well. So when we pay out a claim, or when an insurer pays out a claim, they look at who's on the policy, and they are going to attribute the same bank account. So when an insurer pays out the claim, they transfer it into your bank account. But if your bank account has a different name to what's on the policy, that will delay the claim process. And then it is up to you to prove that these entities are the same, or that you've had a change in ownership, or whatever it is. Yeah. If you have it up front, the process is only a couple of weeks, as I was saying. If it's the wrong name, it's as long as it takes you to prove that you're the owner of that property.
Correct. And a particular example we had this week was in relation to people purchasing in super funds, I believe. And one was a company name, or there was some confusion around particular things like that. And what was, you know, that scenario, making sure that we actually got the right name on the policy?
Yes. So it is really important to have the acting super fund as the insured name. Because there's a lot of holding companies, a lot of holding trusts that are just trustees of the fund. So the bank account normally would be in the super fund's name. So the insurer will be paying the super fund. So you don't want the other names to be confusing the insurer essentially.
And that's great. And guys, I think that's really important that, you want to make sure that, your insurance broker or whoever is doing that is asking you the right questions. I think that was really great going through the process we have in those scenarios ourselves is that, Tom, you were asking questions along the way and, you weren't just accepting what they were telling us. We were making sure that we had the client's best interest and pushing back. And it took a couple of goes and we had to go through a few back checks ourselves, but we actually found the answers we need to, and we were able to explain to the client the difference and
how important
it is and got the right name on the policy.
Because you put yourself in the shoes of the insurer, if they were to pay the wrong entity that wasn't entirely owning that house or that property, that could be disastrous.
Pretty bad,
yeah. So it's important to get that right. Cool.
Yeah, and especially if the insurer doesn't pay the right entity, that money is lost for the insurer.
Yeah,
and that might not even go towards that house.
Correct.
To repair or replace.
That's right. Yeah, and I always feel a little bit anxious when those situations come up because I'm like, hey, I'm trying to look after your best interests, but I see that I'm annoying you quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's the truth is even with the depreciation schedules that we produce for SMSFs, self-managed super funds, is that a lot of the times people don't even know their structures. They've been created structures from their tax agents.
That's right.
Or self-managed super fund audited or whoever it is that set it up for them, and they've in this pickle of like, I know it's all for the tax savings and the structure is there to protect me, but they don't really understand their own structures, and it's important to get that right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Myself as a property investor, to be honest with you, for many years, I didn't have landlord insurance. It didn't come to me as something that I had to do because it wasn't referred to me by my property manager, just like a tax depreciation schedule. Funnily enough, I come across it because someone spoke to me about it. Unfortunately for me, it was about 4 or 5 years later. Well, fortunately, because I never had to make a claim. But, essentially, what I'm thinking about it now, but if you don't get a landlord insurance policy, you're essentially saying financially that you trust your tenant and you've never met them in your life.
Yeah.
And you're trusting the word of your property manager who interviewed or reviewed or assessed these potential tenants. And this person, yes, was the best person at the time based on a couple of bank statements, maybe their income or pay slip, and also what they visually saw. Now, people's circumstances change. I might be sweet today, but tomorrow I could be a completely different person and go wild. And you know what? I'm going to... Not me.
Not me.
I want to smoke up this place, but you could be one of those persons that are a landlord to a tenant like that who does the wrong thing in your property, and then really it's something that it was an oversight on my end.
You're completely right, and even in the good times, it's always easy, right? So everyone has a job, they get pay raises and everything like that, but we're heading into a high interest era, I guess, and it's getting tougher. So people are losing jobs now.
Ahead.
Yeah, and we don't know what happens now. Are people going to share accommodation? Are people going to tell us about the shared accommodation? If they relet it to someone else, can we trust that reletting? So we don't know. That's why we insure. And another thing is, when you invest in something, you want it to grow, and then you also want to maintain a certain amount of capital so you can invest again later on. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to protect what you've already saved up for. So normally it takes you about maybe 5 years or so to save for a deposit, between a couple or something like that. We're saving you that 5 year. So in the next 5 years, you can have your next property rather than worrying about this property again.
And you essentially, with insurance or landlord insurance and building insurance, you're creating a layer of protection for all of those unforeseen circumstances. That's like weather, flooding, thunderstorm, tree drop on your house. Let's face it, these things can happen, right?
That's right.
Down the road from me, you would not believe. I'm sitting there watching 7 News, and there's this P player that's plowed his car into a house.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, man, that house looks familiar. I drove to work the next day. There was police barrier tape 5 doors down from me. I was like, it was right there on my street.
There you go.
Yeah. So insurance.
Yes. So
if you think you didn't need it,
that's right.
think again.
That's right. And that P-plater, if he didn't have insurance, then you're in trouble. Yeah, you're definitely in trouble.
Dan's company car that he drove around used to be my company car. I also didn't have insurance on that car. And someone who was uninsured or unlicensed plowed straight into the side of it, right, Dan?
Oh, no.
I was in a battle with them. And for that year, I thought, you know what? Why would I need full comprehensive insurance on a $10,000 car? I'll just go third party this year.
Yeah.
And boy, was I wrong. Don't skimp out insurance, guys. And whether it's your house or your car, anything that you think is valuable, it doesn't even matter how much money you might have in your bank account or your pocket, always get insurance because they will take care of that matter for you.
Yeah, talking about taking care of matters, there are a few times where people will hit you, right? Not your fault at all, but they'll blame you. So
your car will physically hit you in the face.
I hope just your car.
Can you get insurance on your face?
Surprising, yeah.
Okay.
I think Messi's got insurance on his legs. Isn't he?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, so there are situations out there. People are not as straightforward as, say, you and I or something like that. They hit your car and they'll blame you for it. What some tactics that I've seen in the past, they'll actually get someone else to call up the police department and make an event.
Okay.
And be the witness of the incident and saying it was your fault rather than the other person's fault.
And there's nothing stopping them from making a statement either, is there?
It's yeah.
And it's two people's words against yours.
That's right. So it gets really difficult for those situations. So in an event like that, I would actually recommend that you give your insurance broker a call to figure out how to get around these situations. Making an event number or reporting it to the police is one of the first
things you should do. Yeah.
That's right.
And it can be very tricky in that circumstance there of me trying to talk to the police, make a statement, but also get them to find the person that caused the accident is very tricky, especially when
very hard.
These people they won't let the police in, and it went on for months and months, and eventually it never got resolved, and it became a Tuan problem essentially.
It is, and that happens to a lot of people actually. So yeah, my father-in-law was hit in an intersection. It wasn't his fault. The other car ran away. There was nothing done about it. So our car got written off, but we couldn't do anything. We will report it to the police.
If you think the police is your insurance policy, think again.
No. Unless someone is physically injured, they're not required to investigate. So it's become really difficult, and these things happen a lot.
I've had the pleasure of working with Thong. He's looked after a lot of my personal insurance matters, both business and personal, should I say. And I've had such a great experience with using an insurance broker. It's probably the first time I've used an insurance broker in my life. Prior to that, of course, just like everybody, you go online and you try things out and you buy it and you renew it. And it was quite a straightforward process. But as myself, I got more complicated with my businesses and things like that. It was a great advantage going to one source of truth and that person taking care of all matters. And if you're someone out there with 10 properties or 5 properties or even 3 properties and a car for you and a car for your wife and a car for your daughter or son, there's another reason why an insurance broker can be such great value, because it means that all things are in one place. Yeah. And Thong also has a great business where he reminds you when to get the insurance done and what is the best cover out there, because he doesn't go to just nrma.com.au. Yeah. He goes to several insurance partners like that to find you the best quote, but also when I say best is a balance between cover and premium, because that's what, when I wasn't making too much money, of course, like a lot of people, you would always go find the cheapest thing out there. And, perhaps the cheapest is not always the best, but, they look beyond that, an insurance broker, right?
Yeah. And I totally understand. We started off pretty much with nothing as well. So when we first started, of course, we have to get the cheapest policy. That's right. Yeah. But I was aware of the risk that I was taking on, and that's what I want to pass on to everyone else as well, because we want to make people aware of the risk. And when they get to a stage when they can afford the insurance policies, then they go and approach you for the insurance policies.
But it doesn't have to be even well off. If I just wasn't as informed when I was young.
That's right.
You could, younger in my business, I could have an option of an insurance broker. I thought an insurance broker, we're going to have to pay big premiums, but truth be told, engaging an insurance broker can actually save you a lot of money from the get-go.
Yeah. And you've been a fantastic client, by the way. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So one of the big things I think we had a big turnaround with us is that you guys didn't have cyber insurance earlier on in your business. But now that, I mean, we all understand that data is the business really. And we need to protect that data.
Yeah, 100%. And I remember when I first started, the regulating body of quantity surveyors, they recommended an insurer for my professional indemnity. And that wasn't the only choice. I thought it was the only choice because I had to go with the regulating body's insurance referral, right? But it actually wasn't. Like years later, when I started talking to Thong, he's like, oh, you can actually go here, there. And so that like opened my eyes, and it was a massive saving. And so people out there, they're thinking, I've got to do this. Hey, just ask the question. Are there other people that will insure my dental practice, my medical center, or whatever else that you do professionally? Ask that question. It doesn't hurt, and it costs you nothing. Is that right, Tom? To talk to you?
Oh, it costs me nothing to talk to me, of course. Yes, but there are fees involved if you want to take out the insurance. So
of course, right. And that's the very essence of why you should use insurance partner. And essentially, with Thong, over the years, based on my experience with insurance with Thong, I found that we naturally gravitated towards I identified problems with landlords because in our tax depreciation business at DuoInsurance, we were working closely with landlords, people that are investing in property. Property investors would always talk about, I've got this problem, I had to renovate because the place was burnt down or someone
damaged.
It was drug use, and then we did a renovation. I'd like to claim depreciation. It would seem to be more common than I thought, and maybe because of COVID, I'm not sure. But our business was running through the most of COVID, and so essentially, we witnessed these things, and I identified that perhaps we need to start looking into ways that we can help people through the business of insurance.
I think that's the biggest compliment to you guys, because you guys are no longer the quantity surveyor guys. You're actually property experts. People actually come to you with problems that they want solved. So we even see it now with the property managers that are coming through. They say that, hey, we've been having these problems with these guys in the past, right? What can you do to help? We want this solved. And that's where we've been getting a lot of our successes from, actually. So
with DuoInsurance now that we've started with Thong and Dan's helping us with the setup of the business, essentially it's really identifying some of these pain points that the tenant or the landlords are having, and seeing if we can be a little bit more streamlined in our approach, creating a system that allows landlords to jump onto, and then adopting our insurance policies, but also getting the right coverage, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, so we identify a good insurer, which with really, really good cover. But again, I'm not sure if we should mention it now, but our aspiration is to become the insurer and create even better policies.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've seen a lot is being able to provide the service, being able to answer the questions for both sides of the story, for the property managers and that are helping out their people that are coming on with their new tenants, and also the clients who have questions and who are, unsure with a few processes along the way. They don't have just a computer to go on to. They now have a voice on the other side of the screen to be able to ask those questions. So seeing you interact with them and seeing how we can now help and assist those guys is really, really special to see.
I think one thing I want everyone to take away is that as an insurance broker, we actually act on the behalf of the client, not the insurer. So we're there to fight the insurer for the maximum compensation that you're.
We are essentially the middleman. Is that correct? Once you're an insurance broker, you're the middleman between the insurer and the client that's paying.
Yes. However, in real estate, for example, a buyer's agent acts on behalf of the buyer, and a real estate agent normally acts on behalf of the seller, right? So we're on behalf of the client. So we're out there to look after their best interests. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that's, that's good.
All right, so let's go back to our property blueprint brain buster. So Tuan, let's refresh everybody's memories what we're going to bust today, and then hopefully Thong can shed some light on the matter today.
Yeah, and this one is a really interesting one. I had a friend of mine that came to me, and how I knew about it is because they came to me and asked for a conveyancer to be referred to them for this new purchase. So they were purchasing a property. It was actually in Sydney, sort of middle of Sydney, and they're buying a house for their family. And she came to me at the prior to settling. There was a big storm that came through, and it ruptured a hole through their roof. The damage was between $30,000 to $40,000 as quoted. But during the period of exchange to settlement, as everyone knows, is about 42 days. In this period, all of this happened. Now, she was under the assumption that the existing or the vendor, the person that still owns the house, up until settlement day anyway, would be liable because they live there. Well, the conveyancer who I referred was now brought into the picture because that's what they do. They're there to help you settle on the property. Well, in that period, they said, well, it's not our problem because we're going to be out of here in 2 weeks. That's what the vendor said. And so she was stuck in this pickle of, well, I'm going to buy a house with a hole through it and I don't even own it yet. Yeah. So essentially on the day of settlement, that is no longer the vendor's problem. It becomes her problem is what the conveyancer said. And there's another thing here, but using a conveyancer may have its pros and cons. And in this circumstance, I felt that the con was the conveyancer isn't a lawyer to go litigate the matter. So that's another story we can talk at another stage on the podcast. Yeah. But what's the right thing to do? Because during this period, as everyone can understand, I do too. I've bought a couple of properties myself. I never get building insurance until a day before settlement or when I have the loan approved. And at this stage, her loan was not even approved yet. She was still trying to work through she exchanged, but it had not settled in terms of loans had not been approved. But she was in a pickle where she had a hole through the house that she was going to buy, and she didn't feel like it was her responsibility to fix it.
Yeah. So that's another thing that from a technical standpoint, from an insurer standpoint, you buy it as of settlement, right? Because that's when you take over the property.
Keys and all.
That's right. Yeah. However, I've been talking to a lot of experts, a lot of buyer's agents, a lot of mortgage brokers. They all recommend when you sign the dotted line, you take out insurance. You don't know what's going to happen in the next 42 days. And the seller, they don't want to do anything anymore. That's out of their hand. They've signed the contract. But what you do need to note is that you need to let the insurer know that they're on risk. Even though that you're not responsible for that period of time, if the insurer wasn't made aware of it, we might have a little bit of a gray area, right? But if they were aware of it, what they can do is they can go back to the seller and seek recovery for us. So we might not have to pay out the claim at all. The insurer will go and seek recovery for us. So any of those damages. And an average policy, about $1,000, $1,500. Okay. So if you think about it, you divide that by 12 for that extra 42 days. It's not
$100, $120.
And that's right, a different type of insurance policy to a building.
No, it's the same policy. We just started a little bit earlier.
Right. And it's called on risk, is it right?
No. So the insurance policy is a landlord's insurance or landlords and building insurance, right? But when they come on risk is when the insurer accepts to start the cover.
Right, which is the day you exchange essentially, that you want it.
Yeah, that's right. So just make them aware of it, that you're purchasing the property, this is this date, and that should be all fine,
Yeah, so for the viewers out there, I think it's really important, and because I myself did not know this.
Definitely.
And so until I
bit of a brain buster when you must have heard that.
Through my friend who I referred the conveyancing deal, which I felt really uncomfortable with because I had referred the the conveyancer who couldn't help because she wasn't a solicitor.
Yeah.
And it's something that I never had done myself. And I urge everybody to do this, to take action. And when you're buying a property, take out landlord insurance and building insurance on the day dot of signing a contract.
No, and thank you for sharing that example because it's an example that not too many people would be aware of. Like how many times has the property been damaged during that period of time? But because we're in the industry and we deal with so many investors, we come across that. And
it can happen.
It definitely can happen, awesome. And it happens a lot.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so that was our property blueprint brain buster for the week. If you have any brain busters you would like us to bust on upcoming episodes or anything related to insurance, leave a comment below or send us a message via our Facebook or Instagram pages. So, Thong, thanks for joining us today. For the viewers and everyone listening, what's the best way for them to reach you if they have any insurance questions or needs?
So just our inbox, so info@DuoInsurance.com.au. Dan and I currently man it, so you'll definitely get one of us.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us today. Tuan, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Everybody at home, and if you got some value out of today's episode and you'd like to share it with a friend, please do, and also like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.